You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless unless they rest in you. People of all walks of life are familiar with this quotation articulated by Saint Augustine. Aurelius Augustine was born on 13th November 354 AD at Tagaste, today known as the state of Suk-Aras. He studied and became a great orator who worked in Milan in Italy. He converted to Christianity and he came back to North Africa, specifically at Tagaste, Suk-Aras. Upon his visit to Hippo Regius to see one of his friends, his mastery of the Latin language as a non-orator, ever searching for truth, and his love for God, all these influenced the Christians at Hippo Regius to acclaim, appreciate, and respect Augustine. Therefore, this explains why he was ordained as their priest and later on became a bishop of Hippo Regius, which is currently known as the state of Annaba in the Diocese of Constantine-Hippon in the northeast part of Algeria. Due to the invasion of Vandals at Hippo Regius and of course his old age, Augustine died at the age of 76 years on 28 August 430 AD.
Augustine is always alive, and we see Augustine today in not only in the library that we have that talks about Saint Augustine, his life, his spirituality. We see this interaction which Augustine had before, when he had an interaction between Augustine and the pagans Augustine and the Donatist Augustine. We find that today active as well, as people from different faiths come together to interact with us. And also Augustine is a man whose intellectual capabilities and spiritual growth has actually expanded all through different civilizations.
A great philosopher, theologian, and great saint indeed, who left us many writings that mirrors his spirituality, which is far and widely followed by many sons and daughters of different congregations, but more particularly the friars of the Order of Saint Augustine. What are the traces of Saint Augustine presently? In the Diocese of Constantine-Hippon, the Roman ruins, the modern minor basilica named after Saint Augustine, the house for the old people, and the monastery for the Augustinian friars indeed shows the continuity of Augustine's spirituality today. When, how, and who began the research on the footsteps of Saint Augustine in this region?
The traces
of Saint Augustine at Hippo was the subject of all research work in the ancient Hippo since the arrival of the French people in 1830. The research work in the Christian quarters started from 1923 to 1924 by Erwan Marek, the admiral of the French army.
Since the arrival of the French people in North Africa, they were interested to rediscover, to revive, and to honor Saint Augustine in a better way as far as his origin and teachings are concerned. With that motivation, some archaeological research began with the aim of discovering the traces of Christianity during the time of Saint Augustine. Concretely, this research was carried out on the 70 hectares of land near ancient Hippo Regius, led by Amiral Erwan Marek.
Hippo or Hippo Regius covers 70 hectares. 26 hectares got excavated by the French researchers in the 19th century. Half of the site hasn't yet been discovered.
First and foremost, they discovered the ancient basilica known as Our Lady of Peace, where Saint Augustine is believed to have ministered from.
Nous sommes à la basilique de Saint Augustin. Cette
We
basilique
are in the Basilica of Saint Augustine. This basilica was founded by Saint Augustine himself in 391 AD. Procedures of Kalama mentions that Saint Augustine bought a house beside this basilica. Before building this basilica, it's important to note that Augustine first bought the houses located around.
de cette basilique.
In a more precise way, according to history and the director of the museum, Julianus, one of the richest persons at the time of Augustine, owned a big mansion, and eventually after his demise, this mansion was used to welcome the old people, to feed them and even treat them so as to age gracefully.
Nous avons la maison de Julianus.
We have Julianus' house just next to the basilica, which was used as old people's home. Historic texts mention that it might be Saint Augustine's sister who used to manage that home for the old people.
C'est la sœur de Saint Augustin qui gère cette maison des vieillards.
Indeed, Augustine with his community members lived and practiced charity concretely to the elderly and the poor in the society. To feed and clothe the least in our society is equal to love Christ. Alongside that, the Roman ruins annually attracts thousands of tourists and pilgrims, both locally as well as internationally, who pay a visit to these very Roman ruins. Currently, the Roman ruins occupy only 26 hectares out of 70 hectares piece of land. As a matter of fact, there is a lot of unexploited land that could be having more ruins underneath.
Bien sûr, le site d'Hippone, c'est
The Roman ruins is among the most visited sites in Algeria today. We have between 15,000 and 19,000 visitors every year.
Entre 15 000 et 19 000 visiteurs par an.
In their efforts to revive and honor Saint Augustine beyond the Roman ruins, His Lordship Dupuche, the Archbishop of Algiers, initiated a project of the complex to be built on the hill at La Labuna near ancient Hipporegus. Unfortunately, he managed to only build the altar down the hill that was used to keep the relic of St. Augustine when it arrived from Pavia in the year 1842 AD. Upon his demise, before the realization of that complex, it was Cardinal Lavigerie who bought the whole piece of land surrounding this hill, then commissioned the project of constructing the complex. Are there some concrete reasons why this complex was chosen to be built on this hill? Indeed, such a complex would be a center for pilgrims, tourists, and a place for worship, and more importantly, to welcome the aged persons who lack proper care due to poverty.
En fait, cette colline est très symbolique de ce que notre diocèse.
In fact, this hill is very symbolic in our diocese and the church in Algeria. We have concretely a prayer place, which is this basilica, the only basilica in our diocese.